It turns out, just a moment ago, elsewhere, Xiao Honglian was in the base, appearing bored. At that time, he suddenly received a video call request. He was puzzled, wondering who would contact him at such a moment. When he opened the video call, what he saw was Xiao Tongling from the investigation team. "The zombie wave is hitting again, and we are about to reach your base. Get ready to welcome us and lead everyone to safety," said Xiao Tongling. Upon hearing this, Xiao Honglian jumped from his chair. Wasn't the zombie problem already resolved? He thought. Initially, he planned to refuse, but the other party didn't give him a chance to speak and hung up immediately. After a moment of reflection, Xiao Honglian had no choice but to accept the fact. After all, the other party was from Zhongnan Dachu, and if he didn't help, there would be dire consequences once they escaped. Xiao Honglian then called Zhuge Qingtian in and briefly explained the situation, also instructing him to ensure that everyone in the shelter returned to the underground bunker as quickly as possible. Zhuge Qingtian was visibly stunned when he heard about the new zombie wave. Seeing his hesitation, Xiao Honglian impatiently said, "There's no time to explain. Just do as I say." At the same time, Zhang Yi also received the message from the investigation team. When he learned that Bian Junwu had fled to Yangsheng base, Zhang Yi stared at his phone and thought for a moment. He couldn't allow Bian Junwu to die just yet because he still needed his abilities to fight against Yuan Kongye. Having made up his mind, Zhang Yi didn't hesitate any longer and immediately put on a protective suit. Afterward, Zhang Yi called over Uncle and the others. Once they learned about the situation, each of them expressed their desire to accompany Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi didn't refuse since the more people, the stronger the force. Having them around could help him handle small tasks. He reassured everyone, saying this mission was only about rescuing people. If the situation turned bad, he would activate the double gate and take everyone out. Hearing this, the group seemed to feel more secure, especially Xu Chunlei, who was greatly comforted by Zhang Yi's plan. Zhang Yi then instructed them to change into protective clothing, while he needed to inform the people on duty about the situation. When Zhou Kei'er learned about the mission, she wanted to join, but this time, Zhang Yi refused. The difficulty of this mission was on a completely different level compared to the previous one. If she came along, she would only be a burden. Even though Zhang Yi didn't allow her to go, he assigned her the task of organizing her personal belongings. If things went wrong on the battlefield, his plan was to abandon the shelter and head straight to Blizzard City. Hearing this, Kei's worry deepened, but she had no way to prevent what was happening, so she followed Zhang Yi's instructions and silently prayed for him. Just then, Yang Xinxin suddenly approached Zhang Yi. "Brother, don't forget, this is our only chance." Zhang Yi slowly nodded. "Don't worry, I understand," he replied. By this time, Liang Yu and the others had finished changing. Without saying goodbye, they hurriedly set off to the front lines to rescue the Zhongnan team. Before leaving, Zhang Yi comforted Kei'er, reminding her to follow his instructions and get everything ready at home. Kei'er watched their figures fade into the distance, a deep sense of fear rising in her heart. Fortunately, apart from Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin, no one else fully understood the dangers of this crisis. Otherwise, just the thought of facing the zombies would have terrified them to death. It turns out, just a moment ago, on the other side, Zheng Yixian was visibly shocked after receiving the message from the investigation team. Without any hesitation, he immediately went to find Yuan Kongye. "Something's wrong. Our activities in Aoshan district have been discovered by the people from Zhongnan district." Upon hearing this, Yuan Kongye, who had been sincerely praying, became tense. The words, Zhongnan district, still carried a great deal of threat for him because he wasn't ready to confront such a top-tier organization. Yuan Kongye then asked, puzzled, "Didn't the investigation team leave Tianhai City already? Why are they in Aoshan district?" Faced with the question, Zheng Yixian could only helplessly shake his head. "I don't know. Logically, we chose a very hidden location. Even if the investigation team was searching, they shouldn't have gone to such a desolate place. So, I can't figure out whether this is a coincidence or if someone deliberately led them there." Zheng Yixian continued, "Right now, the zombie horde is attacking the investigation team, and they've sent out distress signals to all the nearby bases. It won't be long before they arrive at the shelter in Yangsheng base. Should we go?" Yuan Kongye looked alarmed and said, "Could this be a trap to lure us out and wipe us out in one fell swoop?" At this moment, Zheng Yixian wasn't sure either, as he had only gathered basic information through the bloodvine. What he could confirm was that the zombie horde had indeed been disturbed. Everything else was just speculation. Yuan Kongye then fell into deep thought. The remaining forces in Tianhai City were no longer strong enough to oppose him, but he was still wary of Zhongnan District, especially the terrifying abilities of Bian Junwu, who could destroy anything in his sight. Even though Yuan Kongye had absorbed 56 different abilities by now, they still didn't add up to even 1/10 of Bian Junwu's destructive power. So he asked worriedly, if we don't go, won't that raise suspicion? After thinking for a moment, Zheng Yixian replied, we should go, otherwise we won't be able to explain this situation. However, I'll go alone. This way, even if something happens, as long as you're safe, our plan will remain intact. At this moment, there was a hidden warmth in Zheng Yixian's eyes. A feeling he couldn't openly express, but it didn't diminish the love he kept in his heart. Yuan Kongye slowly approached him, each step sounding like a melody in Zheng Yixian's ears. Even though Yuan Kongye knew this could be a trap, he was willing to sacrifice anyone for his grand vision, believing that no one was irreplaceable. Yuan Kongye suddenly hugged Zheng Yixian tightly. Brother Zheng, only you treat me the best. Please be careful on this mission. A few minutes later, Zheng Yixian left the cathedral, his face filled with bliss. In the current Baishui sect, there was nothing left that he cared about except for Yuan Kongye. He was determined to clear any obstacles for the woman he loved the most. However, the person he cared for never believed in love. Even for Zheng Yixian, Yuan Kongye was merely exploiting his abilities. If Zheng Yixian wasn't still useful, Yuan Kongye would have eliminated him long ago. On the other side, Xiao Honglian was waiting at the gate with his men to greet the investigation team. He had already prepared everything. Just as he was starting to get impatient, one of the soldiers behind him said, "Boss, look to the east. Is that Captain Bian's vehicle?" What Xiao Honglian saw almost scared him to death. He had never witnessed such a terrifying sight before. The entire horizon was engulfed in a massive snowstorm that stretched endlessly to the naked eye. Even after so many battles with the zombies, they had never encountered such a violent scene. At this moment, Xiao Honglian was filled with fear. He couldn't understand what the investigation team had done to enrage the zombies to such an extent. Just moments ago, Xiao Honglian had seen the millions of zombies on the snowy plains, and a deep sense of fear surfaced within him. But time didn't give him much room to think, as Bian Yi's vehicle soon arrived at the gate of Yangsheng base. The only thing he could do now was to welcome them inside quickly and rush back to the underground shelter. The investigation team, receiving the signal, immediately sped through the gate. Seeing this, Xiao Honglian hurriedly followed them. The investigation team members didn't even wait for the car to stop before jumping out one by one. Tian Junwu immediately gave instructions, everyone, head to the underground shelter. The scale of this zombie horde is too large for us to handle. Upon hearing this, Xiao Honglian wanted to complain. I already saw that. Do you really need to say it? But the overwhelming swarm of zombies didn't give him a chance to speak, so he could only fight while making his way to the shelter. At that moment, the entrance to the underground shelter was also being urgently fortified. The soldiers dared not slack off for a second, eager to complete their tasks and get to safety. Fortunately, Xiao Honglian and his group soon arrived at the shelter. Thanks to their exceptional abilities, if they had been ordinary people, they would have been torn apart by zombies long ago. After entering the shelter, Xiao Honglian quickly ordered the soldiers, "Close the doors now." He was on the verge of collapsing. The soldiers guarding the entrance reacted swiftly and had already begun the process of closing the doors by the time Xiao Honglian gave his order. In the final moment, they successfully closed the alloy gate just in time. Once that gate was shut, unless the zombies had special abilities, they would never be able to break in. Afterward, Bian Junwu and the others went to the control room, where they monitored the situation at Yangsheng base via surveillance cameras. Only then did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. However, Xiao Honglian still wore a look of deep concern. His carefully maintained shelter was on the verge of destruction. He wanted to shout at them, "Weren't you all planning to return to Zhongnan district? Why did you bring the zombies here?" As Xiao Honglian brooded over this, Bian Junwu brought him a bit of good news. He said that he had notified the leaders of various large bases, and reinforcements would be arriving soon. Once they did, they would coordinate an attack to eliminate the zombie horde. Xiao Honglian couldn't hold back any longer. He had just seen the scale of this zombie horde. Even if they had their full strength, they wouldn't stand a chance, let alone with their current diminished forces. He then turned to Bian Yi and asked, "Can't you request support from Jiangnan district? The abilities of Tianhai City's fighters are no longer enough to resist." The only response he got was a cold, "No." In truth, it wasn't that Bian Yi didn't want to ask for help. It's just that they were already one of the top squads in the district. Unless they deployed a full military force, doing so would change the situation entirely. At this point, Xiao Honglian was filled with helplessness. He couldn't blame them either. After all, the zombie crisis erupted in Tianhai City. The fact that they were sending anyone at all was already a big favor. So he could only swallow his bitterness. At that moment, Meng Xiyu connected the satellite system of the district to Yangsheng base and said to the group, "Come take a look. We can now receive live footage of the surface." Hearing this, everyone gathered around the computer. From the video, they saw that the entire refinery had been completely overrun by zombies. It looked like a field infested with locusts. Anyone with a fear of crowded spaces would have a panic attack just by glancing at the scene. Seeing this, Xiao Honglian sighed. "Well, I guess none of us need to go outside anymore." However, things were getting worse for Bian Junwu. He suddenly began coughing violently, which scared everyone around him. Fortunately, after a few minutes, his condition stabilized, and he waved off the concern. He then said, "It seems we'll have to rely on the district's forces. Otherwise, you're all going to die here." Then, Bian Yi smiled faintly. He realized that now the zombies were all gathered in one place, and he could use missiles to clear them out. A single missile strike would wipe out millions of zombies. Xiao Honglian was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. If Bian Junwu went through with this, his base would also be completely destroyed. Bian Junwu knew what Xiao Honglian was thinking, but at this point, there was no other solution to deal with the situation. So this was the only option left. At Jiangnan District headquarters, the Supreme Commander stood by the window, gazing at the falling snow, his thoughts lingering on Bian Junwu, who had been sent to Tianhai City some time ago. He wondered about the status of the zombie crisis and why Bian Junwu hadn't yet returned to report. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Bian Junwu. The commander answered, asking for an update. Bian Junwu's voice sounded tense. "We are surrounded by hundreds of thousands of zombies, trapped at Yangsheng base. We need firepower support." The commander's face turned grim. The zombie crisis in Tianhai City had become this severe? After receiving confirmation, the commander asked Bian Junwu to hold for a moment while he verified the situation. Hanging up the phone, the commander fell into deep thought. Bian Junwu led one of his elite units. If they needed help, it meant the zombie crisis in Tianhai City had escalated to a point where it might soon threaten Jiangnan District's Blizzard City. After all, Tianhai City was only about 300 kilometers away. The commander then ordered his staff to pull up satellite images of Yangsheng base and instructed them to analyze the zombies using AI. Soon, the data appeared on the screen. 395,861 ordinary zombies. 340 large zombies. After confirming the situation, the commander called Bian Junwu again. "The number of zombies is overwhelming. Using regular missiles won't completely eliminate them. Moreover, the munitions factories have limited production capacity, and we can't afford to waste more conventional missiles. The best solution is to deploy Death of Love." The commander continued, "From what I know, the underground defenses of Yangsheng base can accommodate 172 people. You all should be able to survive a Death of Love attack. That way, the zombies on the surface can be wiped out." Bian Junwu's voice was grave. "Commander, if we do this, all of Tianhai City will become a boiling cauldron." But the commander was thinking of the bigger picture. Sacrificing a portion of Tianhai City was better than allowing the zombies to spread to other cities. Bian Junwu understood the commander's rationale, and his heart grew heavy. While only a few thousand people remained in Tianhai City, using Death of Love to eliminate the zombies was indeed the most effective strategy. But it also meant that they were being abandoned. Once an area is hit by Death of Love, the radiation in the air takes 20 years to dissipate. This meant they would be forced to stay in the underground shelter for 20 years. Bian Junwoo looked around at their supplies. The resources were far from enough to last that long, which meant they would eventually die, trapped in the darkness. After careful thought, Bian Junwoo made one final request to the commander. Give us more time. Let me try again to see if we can break through. The commander agreed but only granted him 24 hours. If the zombie horde wasn't dealt with by then, Jiangnan district would deploy Death of Love to Tianhai City. After Bian Junwoo hung up the phone, Xiao Homlian anxiously asked, "What did the headquarters say? When will the missile support arrive?" Bian Junwoo, his tone heavy, replied, "The order from headquarters is that the number of zombies is too large. They've decided to launch Death of Love to wipe out the horde." Xiao Homlian was shocked to the core. What are they thinking? The color drained from Xiao Homlian's face. If they deploy Death of Love, Tianhai City will become a wasteland. The survivors will die from radiation. Are they just going to leave us to rot in the underground shelter? Bian Junwoo, his gaze cold, said, "Anger and frustration won't help us now. We need to figure out how to deal with the zombie crisis outside. Otherwise, we'll be trapped in the underground shelter until we die." Bian Junwoo glanced at his watch. There were only 23 hours and 58 minutes left before Death of Love was launched. He then ordered Xiao Homlian, hand over all of the base's data, especially the maps of weapon placements. Turning to Meng Sayu, Bian Junwoo instructed, inform everyone of the situation in full detail. Let them know that if we don't fight with everything we have to eliminate the zombies, we're all doomed. And if anyone tries to desert, they'll face relentless pursuit from Jiangnan district.